In addition, the proposal contains plans to tax companies, especially those with significant carbon emissions. With Kenya keen to achieve its 32% reduction of carbon emissions by 2030, Energy CS Davis Chirchir had at the COP27 conference spoken of plans to use green hydrogen cars which consume electricity in future.
Do convince Kenyans to convert their engines from running on fossil fuel. We should really be giving them a serious advantage. And we were in talk with a number of countries, with the president, regarding developing of charging facilities to be able to have a cheap framework of being able to transfer from fossil fuel run vehicles to electric vehicles.
But what do those using their vehicles on an almost daily basis have to say about the proposal?
Hiyo kitu itatu affect in a big way. So for me, it's a no. I don't think it will do so much about the environment and pollution, because at least everybody right now, we are using fuel and all that. So embracing the whole idea of electric cars, maybe in some years to come.
Doesn't make sense to me, because now we have evolved and most of the cars are new, and sasa hii mambo ya like emission and stuff doesn't really apply. Ni percentage kidogo sana.
With the current economic status, it's very hard for us to be able to be added more tax, because the issue at hand is very expensive as it is right now. So maybe could be we could have a proposal of later on, not currently.
Victor's concerns are not isolated. One of the concerns associated with carbon tax is transparency from the government on how the funds will be utilized, especially considering public mistrust on tax and corruption.
Well, the standoff on the allocation of revenue to the counties seems to have a long way to go before any concrete solution can be arrived at. This is after another meeting set up by Deputy Rigathi Gachagua to quell the stalemate ended in yet another stalemate, leaving the president with a mountain to climb with regard to the equitable revenue allocation. Brian Mushiri has more.
Ladies and gentlemen, His Excellency the Deputy.
The Council of Governors has maintained its hard stand on the county shareable revenue. In a consultative meeting to deliberate on the annual division of revenue between the two levels of government and the National Treasury, as well as the Commission on Revenue Allocation (CRA), the county bosses say they are not content with the proposal to have 370 billion shillings splashed their way. Instead, they want 425 billion shillings for the financial year 2023-24.
In this regard, we express our discontent for the National Treasury's failure to build consensus on the county equitable share of revenue, despite the objective recommendations by the CRA.
Away from this, other bones of contention that came up include that the shareable revenue is projected to increase by 374 billion shillings for the financial year 2023-24, out of which only 10 billion shillings has been allocated to counties, representing a mere 2.67%. A careful analysis of the draft budget policy statement indicates a considerable increment in the share of revenue for functions that have been largely devolved, and the budget ceilings for ministries, departments and agencies has not been rationalized to ensure that the key priority programs for the government, which are fully devolved, are allocated to counties in the equitable share of revenue. Outgoing Commission on Revenue Allocation Chairperson Jane Kerengai, in a sit-down with President William Ruto on the 17th of January 2023 at State House, Nairobi, indicated that there had been growth from 190 billion shillings in 2013 to the proposed 407 billion shillings this year for the county governments, dropping the bombshell that counties could well have received 3 trillion shillings this financial year included since the onset of the devolved government in 2013. Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua today, for the second time in as many months, also tried his hand in the matter by chairing an extraordinary session of the Intergovernmental Budget and Economic Council (IBEC) for this financial year. However, insiders who attended the afternoon meeting have indicated that minimal progress was made in the meeting and that another IBEC meeting is set to be chaired by President William Ruto on the 10th of February 2023. Brian Mushiri, NTV, Nairobi.
All right, well, away from that, in a case of mixed reporting, the Directorate of Criminal Investigations has given two conflicting accounts of the events surrounding the rescue of Daisy Chebet Barno, a student of Egerton University who went missing on the 26th of January. Bridget Sangana has more on this.
On the official Twitter page of the Directorate of Criminal Investigations, the DCI reported of a case of betrayal, where Faith Mwende, a student at Egerton University, is said to have orchestrated the kidnapping of her friend and classmate, Daisy Chebet Barno, who was last seen on January 26th boarding a vehicle with Simon Akuteka, Faith's boyfriend, at Kabarak in Nakuru County. 5 days later, according to the DCI Twitter account, Faith would lead the detectives to a two-bedroom house in Ruiru, Kiambu County, where Daisy was being held as the suspects waited for her family to pay the 600,000 shilling ransom. NTV has seen the signal report sent to the DCI headquarters, which says police arrested the suspects along the eastern bypass and not at the Ruiru house as reported on Twitter. The signal report read in part, on Monday at 2000 hours, officers from CRIB headquarters, DCI Nakuru and DCI Ruiru intercepted a red Mazda Demio registration number KCX526V along Eastern Bypass near KFC, and the victim, namely Daisy Chebet Barno, was rescued being safe and in good health. The suspects, Faith Mwende, Elijah Chege, Simon Akuteka, and John Mbao, are in custody as investigations into the incident continue. Bridget Ngana, NTV, Nakuru.
All right, and now let's switch gears to a rather exciting story where a family in Nakuru is delighted after a 25-year-old woman delivered quintuplets on Tuesday afternoon. Margaret Wairimu is currently in stable condition as her 4 daughters and a son continue being monitored by the Nakuru Level 5 doctors. And Viz Ruth Sarmoy has more.
Simon Ndungu Kinyanjui, a public service vehicle driver, was en route to Nairobi when he received the news of the quintuple blessings that had just arrived back at home.
Tulikuwa tunatarajia watoto watatu because scan ya kwanza ilisema watoto ni triplets.
At the Margaret Kenyatta mother baby wing is 25-year-old Margaret Wairimu, who is recuperating after going into labor on January 31st while she was 25 weeks pregnant.
She had a high risk while pregnant. We went ahead, took her to theatre, and we successfully delivered 5 children, that is quintuplets. 4 of them were female and 1 male.
Hata wakikuja wengine Mungu bado atatengeneza njia. Atajua vile wao watoto watagrow. Hata wanasema mtoto akikuja anakuja na sahani yake.
Meanwhile, the preterm little angels continue being monitored at the hospital.
We know that the babies were of very low weight and were immature, especially the organs. Therefore, we have proceeded to have the babies in our specialized newborn unit, whereby management is ongoing. So far, we are doing our best and we are trying to save all their lives.
Being a rare occurrence, medical doctors explain the circumstances under which multiple pregnancies can occur.
You can have one egg which is fertilized and then it breaks into many, whereby they have one placenta. Other times you may have 2 eggs or 3 eggs which get fertilized, and then you can have one of them breaking into several.
The 2 lovebirds who met in high school welcomed their firstborn child in 2018, and despite having a taste of parenting, 28-year-old Simon is pleading for help to bring up his expanded family.
Kama mnavyoniona, mwili yangu si kubwa vile, mimi ni mdogo. Kwa hivyo mtoto mmoja upande ya kulia, mwingine upande ya kushoto. Mama yao naye atakuwa akibeba mmoja. Sasa hawa wawili sasa si unaona kunahitajika a helping hand.
These new births are the first quintuplets to have been delivered at the regional facility. So far, only the parents have been allowed to see the babies. Ruth Sarmoy, NTV, Nakuru.
Wow, quite a blessing, and also interesting that one day you just deliver and you're a mother of 5. All right. Now, in perhaps the most clearest yet desperate attempt to muzzle the Kenyan media, members of the National Assembly have today toyed, that was yesterday actually, toyed with the bizarre suggestions including denying journalists access to Parliament by shutting down Parliament's media centre. The members of Parliament speaking in Mombasa further indicated their displeasure in the way the media has constantly called out their move to reinstitute CDF after the courts found elements of its law illegal. Ibrahim Karanja reports on the consistent attempts by Parliament to gag the media, to have only what they wish reported on and anything else swept under the carpet.
The move by parliamentarians to now poke their nose and have control over the independent operations of the media is now taking a different yet most bizarre trajectory, with Westlands Member of Parliament Tim Wanyonyi without flinching calling the closure of Parliament's media centre the base of operation for all journalists covering parliamentary affairs.
What is the benefit of Parliament having a media centre housed in Parliament, and yet we don't get the benefit of it?
Wanyonyi's sentiments came at the height of responses from colleague members of Parliament in a session facilitated by Media Council of Kenya CEO David Omoyo and Kenya Editors Guild Council member Martin Masai. The desperate attempts by parliamentarians also leading to allegations of improper dressing by journalists within the precincts of Parliament by Session Chair Rachel Nyamai.
There seems to be a gap between the way Parliament conducts itself in terms of the way people dress, the way we conduct ourselves, and the big team of journalists that we have. Is there a way that we can have a conversation, or you can have a conversation with our leadership, so that, especially the young, so that they can up their game, especially on matters of the way they appear, because it is a big concern.
Nyamai's assertions largely coming out as unfounded, as pressmen accessing Parliament are also guided by the dress code as prescribed in the Speaker's rules, and a claim of improper dressing would only be an indication of failure by parliamentary orderlies who subject each person entering Parliament to deep scrutiny. Claims of a biased media during the campaign period also came up, with members of Parliament accusing the Media Council of Kenya of being toothless.
I mean, the Media Council. The Media Council seems to be impotent. Do you have powers? Or is there anything the National Assembly can help you in terms of legislation to ensure you get teeth to bite, so that we don't have media stations and particular journalists? And in fact, if you go to the media stations, it is not the station itself. It is particular journalists who are inciting ethnic hatred, profiling ethnicity, people along their ethnicities, on air.
Every time you have a presser or you need their services, if you don't have a budget for them, you are given a blackout. I don't know how you deal with that, how we are going to deal with it.
Is it a coincidence that 2 newspapers in this country had a headline talking about the misuse of bursary by members of Parliament to the tune of 1.2 billion, when we all know that members of Parliament are supposed to give this bursary as grants, and then it is up to the parents when they get the receipts from schools to send to the CDF offices? And that was put in headline in 2 papers. Who paid for those headlines, and what are you going to do about it? Because the reputation of members is at stake when we are fighting for the people who brought us to this house.
One key news value is timing. The timeliness of an event. It is likely to have greater visibility when MPs are here. That timing.
The latest move, seen as a continuation by the lawmaking body to control the media and its operation, being a culmination of attempts by Parliament to usurp the MCK's role of accrediting journalists, as it sought to block out validly accredited journalists from Parliament towards the end of last year. Ibrahim Karanja, NTV.
Now, former ruling party Jubilee has announced plans to relocate its headquarters from Pangani along Thika Road to Kileleshwa In a letter seen by NTV, Jubilee Secretary General Jeremiah Kioni states that the party will now focus on recruiting new members and revamp its grassroots offices. Jubilee, which had 140 members of parliament after the 2017 election, now only has a paltry 28 members after the 2022 general election, some of whom are now warming up to President William Ruto's UDA. Could this be the beginning of the end of the once monolithic Jubilee party? Sydney Chazima interrogates.
In the run-up to the 2017 general election, the Jubilee Party's meticulous organization and the flamboyance of its events was second to none. The party rivaled its competitors in many ways, and its top leadership, comprising of the famous Uhuruto camaraderie, kept the party moving like a well-oiled machine. Its headquarters at Pangani along Thika Road was arguably the largest among all parties in the country, with a beehive of daily political activities in the offices, only comparable to China's Communist Party. But going by recent reports, the party has been struggling to pay rent, with the arrears reported to have accumulated to a tune of 435 million shillings.
Mimi maneno yale yote niliyosema yamekuja kutimia. Lile jumba la Jubilee linauzwa liko kwenye mnada.
Hence, the party is now relocating to Kileleshwa off Mandera Road. In the communique by Secretary General Jeremiah Kioni, Jubilee is now refocusing on revamping its regional and grassroots offices. Equally, Kioni appears to be at home with the fact that the party needs new members and fresh blood in the leadership roles. The relocation appears to point at a possible decline in funds received from the Office of the Registrar of Political Parties. After the 2017 election, Jubilee was entitled to over 300 million shillings from the political parties fund, as opposed to the 135.1 million shillings they are bound to receive in 2022. The party was bedeviled by leadership wrangles occasioned by the much publicized fallout between Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto.
Despite the challenges that we have faced from a few noisy naysayers who have tried to rock the party from within.
Wanaume bado wanaketi hapo watu wanatuongelesha, mnatuongelesha nini nyinyi watu bure? Maharibu chama mpaka imepotea, mnatuambia nini? Nyinyi kwendeni bure kabisa.
As a result, President Ruto and his political allies ditched Jubilee for UDA, while Jubilee found new allies in the shape of their political arch-nemesis, ODM.
We therefore cannot understand the anger and bitterness we see in them when they hear that Jubilee is revamping in preparation for the 2022 elections.
Nafikiri itaingia kwa Guinness Book of Records kwamba once upon a time there was a party, a ruling party, that collapsed and died and was eventually sold to the opposition. What kind of history is that?
The Jubilee Party, however, faced stiff competition and was not entirely successful in pushing away the UDA wave from its perceived central Kenya stronghold. As a result, Jubilee only had 28 MPs, down from the 140 MPs it had in 2017. And some of the 28 Jubilee MPs appear to be warming up to William Ruto's UDA while giving the Azimio anti-government rallies a cold shoulder.
Wameona kwamba hawezani kupinga serikali. Yani uwezi ukashindana na ndovu msalani.
In the Azimio anti-government rallies, Jubilee Secretary General Jeremiah Kioni now ventures alone without his Jubilee foot soldiers.
Wengine wajumbe walikuwa kwa Azimio, wengine wamenunuliwa kama kuku sokoni.
Jubilee haitafanya kazi na Kenya kwisha.
Katibu mkuu wa chama gushi, chama ambacho hakina watu, mkebe wa kimbo ambao huna mafuta.
Is the decision to relocate the party headquarters and the talk of Jubilee MPs warming up to Ruto's UDA a sign of the end times for the Jubilee Party? Sydney Chazima, NTV.
And regional leaders who attended a Somalia frontline summit on Wednesday agreed to make a final push for joint operations in the areas that remain under the Al-Shabaab group in order to liberate Somalia. The meeting was held under tight security in Villa Somalia, although reports from Mogadishu state that mortar shells exploded in the Somali capital in the hours preceding the arrival of the heads of state. The leaders also noted that the said final push will facilitate the drawdown of 80 ATMIS troops and the gradual handover of security responsibilities to the nation's security forces. Leila Mohammed has more.
In which the Al-Shabaab terror group has continued its offensive on both military and civilian targets in Somalia, Kenya and Ethiopia in the last few months, has formed the basis of the Somalia Frontline States Summit in Mogadishu. The security situation was heightened prior and during the meeting, with major roads leading in and out of Villa Somalia remaining closed much of the day. There were, however, reports of mortar attacks inside Mogadishu during the meeting. Wednesday's summit focused on strengthening partnerships in the fight against international terrorism.
Hali ya usalama inaendelea nchini Somalia si hali ambayo inaishia Somalia peke yake, bali ni hali ambayo inahusisha pia nchi jirani na pia kuhakikisha kwamba Somalia inapata amani ya kudumu, na baada ya hali hiyo kumalizika, nchi hizi zitakuwa na nafasi sasa ya kuangazia mambo ya maendeleo, mambo ya ushirikiano wa kiuchumi na mambo ya ushirikiano wa kisiasa.
Al-Shabaab have control of large areas of Somalia and are continuing to carry out regular attacks. They have lost territory since the government, backed by the US and African troops, launched a new offensive last August. Kenya's President William Ruto has stated the need to dismantle terror networks and financial support infrastructure. He also notes that this must be complemented by countering radicalization and the propagation of extremism. Somalia, on its part, has reiterated the importance of respecting its sovereignty, territorial integrity, political independence, unity as a federal state, whereby it has been applauded for the progress made to rebuild and modernize its security forces.
Mkutano huu unakuja wakati mzuri kwa sababu kulikuwa na mafanikio makubwa ambapo wanajeshi wa serikali ya Somalia walifanikiwa kuteka maeneo kadhaa nchini Somalia.
Army commanders and defense ministers from the whole of Africa had earlier held a meeting in Mogadishu, the Somali capital, with the main focus being the ongoing crackdown against the militants who are wreaking havoc in the country and the region. For the last couple of months, the Somali National Army has been pursuing the militants from several fronts across Somalia with the help of US Africa Command, the African Union Transition Mission in Somalia ATMIS and local militia. In the Wednesday meeting that was also attended by the military chiefs, President Ruto asked the people of Somalia to rise up bravely to seize back their country from the clutches of the Al-Shabaab terrorist group. Leila Mohammed, NTV.
All right, thanks Leila for that. Well, quickly, let's just have a look at what's in the dailies this morning before we get into our conversation. So I'm going to begin with the Daily Nation, of course. This is what we have on the front page of the Daily Nation. Ruto moves to break up grouping in coalition. Housekeeping. President William Ruto has moved to avert a fallout in his Kenya Kwanza alliance by banning regional caucuses in parliament that are reportedly inflaming tensions within the ruling coalition. This could also be aimed at containing factions from Mount Kenya and Western that at this point were coalescing around Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua and Prime Cabinet Secretary Musalia Mudavadi. That is on the full report is on page 4 of the Daily Nation. Also, which will be subject to our conversation this morning, 13 subjects, junior high, no child's play. While grade 7 learners began the junior secondary education this week, are studying more subjects compared to the last batch of 844 pupils who were in standard 8. The 1.2 million students in the JSS are studying 12 core subjects and a maximum of 2 optional subjects, unlike the 5 they would have taken under the 844 system. We'll be trying to get an in-depth analysis on the whole CBC issue in a moment. Just adjacent to that report, diesel prices to rise on new pollution tax, where the state proposes a change in the taxation of fuel, which could see different fuel products taxed based on their contribution to greenhouse emissions. You can find that full report there on the very back page of the Daily Nation. All right, so let me try and get to the second page just very quickly to see what I have on the second page of the Daily Nation. There you have it. Kenya, Ethiopia, Djibouti join Al-Shabaab offensive, and Somalia is keen on rooting the terror group that has kept the country unstable for years. And we see that, you know, Kenya has finally joined Ethiopia and Djibouti in launching this joint military offensive against the Al-Shabaab insurgents to prevent their infiltration into the region as the war against the militia in Somalia continues. Also address the security concerns at Karebe mining. The British High Commissioner to Kenya, Jane Marriott, has raised concern over the controversy facing the Karebe Gold Mining Company in Nandi. She has urged Governor Stephen Sang to look into the security concerns in the minefields. Now, remember, this follows the death last week of 3 Karebe gold miners, mining workers, in a blast at the site, exposing the bitter rivalry in the gold fields. 6 others were injured in that particular incident. All right. Well, away from that, let's see what we have here next. MPs berate scribes of a dress code, wants them banished from the House. We saw that report there by Ibrahim Karanja. We'll be following up that story very closely as well. And this is what was on the very front page of the Daily Nation. Ruto banning MPs caucuses in a bid to prevent fallout within the Kenya Kwanza coalition. All right, Gachagua to get back his 200 million from the state. The deputy president yesterday managed to get back his 200 million shillings that had been frozen by the state for 6 months. The Court of Appeal ordered the return of the 201 million after the Asset Recovery Agency said that it had been misled by the Directorate of Criminal Investigations to freeze the funds. Now, from the sum, Gachagua will get 200 million, while Ann Kimemia Trading as Gen Enterprises will get 1 million. All right, you can find that full report as well. That's around on the 5th page of the Daily Nation. All right, so learners in junior high to take more subjects. KICD now says, remember, we have about 1.2 million students in the junior secondary schools who are studying 12 core subjects and up to 2 optional subjects. All right, this full report will be taking a look and, of course, just getting bits of it from what is written here and have a discussion around the same area as well. Just to mention a couple of things here from the report. In most schools, head teachers have singled out teachers with degrees to teach in the JSS. The teachers have been downloading materials and using both their personal and institutional digital gadgets to teach students. The graduate teachers say, unlike the standard 7 pupils whom they taught for years, there has not been grading learners with marks, but their abilities. All right, we'll be having a conversation on that as well. Machogu order on school hours sparks controversy, and this is brewing over that push by the Education Ministry to enforce a ban on classes outside the stipulated teaching hours that now forces students to report to schools early and leave late. Teachers say they will comply with Cabinet Secretary Ezekiel Machogu's directive curbing early morning and late evening classes, but point to challenges that force them to resort to that extra lesson, such as understaffing. So how exactly is that going to pan out for learners? And that will also be something we will certainly be delving into in a moment. Counties stick to their guns in revenue share stalemate, and governors have stuck to their guns, demanding the 425 billion from the National Treasury in equitable share of revenue and raising the stakes in the stalemate ahead of a scheduled meeting with President William Ruto. This is the second time the COG is rejecting the 380 billion allocation to counties by Treasury for the 2023-2024 financial year. And we can see that the Council of Governors chairperson there, Ahmed Abdullahi, that's when he was addressing journalists. You can see the Kakamega Governor Fernandes Baraza, also Nyeri's Mutahi Kahiga, as well as Makwenis Mutula Kilonzo there. All right. Magistrate frees Korogosho MCA unconditionally. Korogosho MCA Odhiambo, commonly known as Matakwe, is now a free man. He was freed after trial magistrate Gilbert Shikwe ruled that he was arrested and detained based on a non-existent law. You can find that report and understand the context of it as well on the 8th page of the Daily Nation. Just let me finish up on Daily Nation very quickly. Police probing a dreaded gang's reign of terror in Eldoret town. And police are investigating the activities of a dreaded gang that had been terrorizing residents in Eldoret town. The gang, commonly referred to as Koita, is said to have more than 30 members and has been extorting money from traders and sexually harassing women. Now, recently, members of the gang allegedly threatened a magistrate over a case filed against some of its members in an Eldoret court. Okay, and that's one of the issues with regard to security in the country. And finally, reprieve for NLC as a 3 billion payout order was suspended. That's by the court. And 2 billion project to boost potato farming in North Rift region. What's that all about? Well, you can certainly read that on the 10th page of the Daily Nation. This is what we have on the Business Daily. Bank SACCO's double size of subsidized mortgage to 8 million shillings. A state-backed mortgage refinancing company has doubled the size of subsidized home loans to 8 million due to the rising cost of buying houses. Also, how VAT export ruling will hit Kenyan firms and multinationals, as well as poster on the sport over the 540 million pension dues. These are just some of the stories you can find on the Business Daily. And finally, on Taifa Leo, Yesu wa Bungoma. That's what they're saying. Kazi huyu wa Tongare nasema ni watu 168,000 pekee wataenda mbinguni kote duniani na wawili tu kutoka Nairobi. That's an interesting read there. And you can find that report on Taifa Leo. This is from Kijiji cha Luhokwe. This is in Tongaren in the county of Bungoma. All right. Well, away from that, we're not going to get much deeper into the other, stories within the paper. But of course, I can just take a look at very quickly on the Standard. I see that on the Standard, the deal that earned Rigathi extra millions. That's what the Standard has on its headlines on the first page of the Daily. All right, so what we'll do is we are going to take a very short break. When we come back, we will be having a conversation on the state of education in the country and, of course, the issue of the CBC and the transition of the junior secondary school learners in a moment. And I will be introducing my panelists then. Stay with us. I'll be back in a while.
Akipigiwa Maria, midundo mitamu vinandana tarumbeta, yote vyasikika akipigiwa Maria. Leo twakushangilia tukiwa nayo furaha, salamu Maria, mama wa huruma, twakushangilia.
To get Midundo Mitamu by St. Raphael Benedictine, dial star 811 star 937 hash. Skiza, Na Nation.
No bunga pagi pendene lace de mysteri. No ba unga ti browse on flick ni mysteri. No bunga mni gana next week ni mysteri.
Only on the trend. 10 p.m.
The Trend in association with Glovo.
With Glovo, you have the city in your hands. Unatamani chakula different? Order Glovo, ujaribu restaurant mpya. Unataka drinks zaidi? Order Glovo, ushangilie timu yako. Download the app and order anything you want.
We'll be talking about a treatment, and that is coronary artery bypass graft surgery.
2018,
I started feeling tired. I sweat, terribly sweating. So I started experiencing difficulties even in breathing.
Health is wealth, because you know, once you get the disease, it is going to be expensive. So it is better to prevent. You know, prevention is better than cure.
You should not think this is witchcraft. Yeah. Somebody has thrown disease to me. No, 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 no.
Grow your biashara by accessing loans, investment options, convenient banking, network opportunities, and so much more. Njoo tukujenge. Visit any one of our 93 branches countrywide. Family Bank is regulated by the Central Bank of Kenya.
Bramwell Bushuru and his family are the only Kenyans on St. Helena Island that is found in South Atlantic Ocean.
The terrain, the people, the culture, the systems. It's a place like no other.
Bramwell is an air traffic controller on the island whose population is about 4,000 people.
Link 3136, I copied 1229, stand by descent.
Also on the show, why Kenya has been ranked best in aviation security in the region and what it means for the country.
Aviation security is not a one-man show. It involves everybody in the industry.
When it comes to aviation security, airports are absolutely key.
This Saturday at 7:30 p.m. on NTV.
To protect our family from germs that cause illness when it's cold, we use Dettol soap.
Dettol soap with germ defense gives you protection. When it's cold, germs are transferred in different ways, and Dettol soap's germ defense protects you from up to 100 illness-causing germs. Be Dettol sure.
Claiming your assets is easy. Simply visit UFAA website www.ufaa.go.ke or dial *361# or visit Huduma Center near you.
All right, thank you for staying with us. You can always talk to us on our social media platforms at NTV Kenya. You can also tweet me at Zainab Ismail. The hashtag we used this morning is MLiveNTV, and I'm not alone in studio. Allow me to introduce my panelists this morning. Dr. Utheri Kanayo, Principal and Co-Founder, Children in Freedom Schools, which is also the first Afrocentric school in East Africa. You'll have to tell us a little bit about what that really means. Karibu sana, good morning. Dr. Jane Rose Kibara, Educationist and Senior Lecturer and Researcher of Education Management and Policy at Kenyatta University. A very good morning, Karibu sana. And of course, Virginia Ndingiru is the Director of Programs, Zizi Afrique Foundation. A very good morning, Karibu sana to the program. As we just take a look at how we are, how we've fared on in terms of the education sector, allow me to begin with the issue of the CBC. Now, the CBC, the basic premise of it was, you know, what you learn can be measured. It is all about the competence and the skills of the students. I just want to get, let me begin with you, Dr. Utheri. How would you describe the education reforms we've had in the country, or we've gone through in the country so far, from where we began to where we are now? How would you describe it?
Okay, so thank you for having me. I think we are aware the journey of education from maybe the colonial period, and just straight after that, where we went into service-oriented education, because we had to fill the Kenyan market with skilled workers. So it was something driven very much, the education at that point was something driven to give us the skills to be able to run ourselves as a country. And then after some reviews, we are well aware of what I also went through, the 844 during President Moi's time, where now we went back to let's give these children some skills to be able to employ themselves, not just to have service skills that they are going to be employed, but let them do some crafts that will be able to employ, make them employ themselves. And then that then later was changed to, oh, there are too many subjects. Let's drop the arts. let's keep to some, I think 5 core subjects.
Right.
And so we lost the arts, the music, you know, the emotive, the subjects that would bring out the creativity and emotive side of somebody. And I think up to date we feel the impact of that, because through arts and through creativity, we are able to bring out imagination and how we can solve problems. And then now, fast forward to 2017, 2018, when they now brought the competency-based curriculum, it was more that the 844 system is more of cognitive, just getting knowledge, okay? Now let's bring in what can help the child to get skills that will help them express themselves better, will help every learner be relevant according to their competence. So we've moved through the years, I think, kind of in circles, more or less. When I look at CBC now, especially the JSS program, it's taking us back to the previous 844, but in a way that is quite simpler when you look at the content in the curriculum, very, to me, in a more basic, common way that would allow every child to be given a chance to understand.
In your interaction with the learners, about 7 years into the CBC implementation in the country, have you seen the impact? Can you see it? Is it tangible?
I think I can only speak for my Freedom School, and then the rest, mostly from what I hear and observe. And my panelists can also add into this. You cannot speak of CBC in a blanket way.
Right.
Hawezi, okay?
Yeah.
CBC depends on, like every institution, of course, the leadership, how creative, how imaginative, how passionate. Because you're given a curriculum which is supposed to be for all. So it's quite basic, okay? And then how do you turn that into gold? How do you now bring it out? So in schools that maybe the teachers and the leadership are creative, are exposed, are embracing of new things, CBC will take off. Because CBC will say, let's do digital literacy. So if you're somebody who is into technology and you believe African children should be just as good, if not better than their counterparts, tick. Okay? Right. Communication, imagination, and all that. You as the leader and the teacher must already be having these skills so that you can meet the needs of the children to have these skills.
Right.
In a school that might not have the competent staff within the skills that are needed to be given for CBC, I don't think it's going very well.
Right.
And of course, there's the argument of resources as well.
And we'll certainly be coming back to that in a moment. Dr. Jane Rose, from where you sit, from a historical background, what informed our decision to change and reform our curriculum?
Thank you very much. Actually, I'll begin by saying that education is meant to make people, make learners better citizens. It's meant to empower them. And I will begin by saying that 844 was not a bad system. It is the implementation that went wrong. And my worry is, are we capable of doing it well this time round? It and all good things. My colleague has just mentioned that, you know, it and the arts, the music. Some of us went through the system.
Right.
And I believe that almost everyone in this studio went through that particular system. It was a beautiful system. I remember in my house of beautiful tablecloths that I made when I was at school, at primary school. But now that was gradually eroded, and we made it an exam-oriented system. So we can say that that is what has brought us here now. We've realized that the system of education that we have is not meeting the needs of us as a nation. Education is meant to produce individuals who can actually be able to meet their own needs and meet the needs of other people and the needs of our country, needs of our economy, become productive individuals. And the question we need to ask ourselves is this what is happening as we speak? I'll say no. For example, I'll say there's a huge disconnect between the graduates that we produce and the needs of our economy. And that is why, for example, at Kenyatta University, where I teach, we are actually working together with UNESCO to ensure that we have a program where we will liaise with the market, you know, the market players, the people in the market, the industry. There will be a linkage between the academia and the industry, so that we are able to know the kind of graduates that you are producing. Are they able to meet the needs of our country? Are they able to cope? Are they able to be productive? Because there's been a lot of, you know, complaints about half-baked graduates. You've heard that. And that is a
so
gap.
do you blame that on the former curriculum, the EdFu forces? Okay, still in play, but do we blame it on that curriculum?
I'll not blame it on the curriculum. I'll blame it on the implementation. We went wrong on the implementation. And then we were not, you know, we were not able to get all the stakeholders around the table. And that is what we need to do even now. And that gap is still there. You've had many stakeholders in education saying, we've not been consulted, we've not been involved. That is very important. For example, how many scholars have been brought on board to give their views as we are implementing this particular, not even at the implementation stage, even at the conception stage, and even as we implement. Therefore, I would say that what we need to do is to ensure that we all work together as stakeholders in education. We work together with the private sector. And that actually now brings me to the issue of even the resources. There's a huge disparity now as we implement the CBC curriculum.
Right.
Look at that child in Mandera, that child in Lamu.
So we still have a huge inequality when it comes to our education in the country, right?
Enormous.
Enormous. All right.
Enormous.
We'll try and pick out a couple of those issues in a moment. Let me get Virginia on this. First of all, I also want to get your general thoughts on the issue of the implementation of the CBC. How have we fared on 7 years on?
Yeah, thanks for having me this morning, and to my colleagues who've contributed to the discussion. It's 6 full years of being on the system,
right.
And we are seeing our first graduate cohort transitioning this week into junior secondary. I would admit it's been a journey, and a journey full of lessons, tough times at times, because it was a shift that was much desired. And like my counterparts have been saying, the challenge of learning outcomes, the quality of learning, has been questioned severally, not only through other researches, but also through the national assessments as well, assessments such as the NASMLA and SACMEC. All those assessments have come out to point to us that indeed there is a challenge. So this shift, I think, first and foremost, was inspired in an attempt to educate the whole child. A child who is educated cognitively, what they call educating the head. A child who has, who is educated at heart. They have values, and they have, they have all these values that allow them to coexist. And also technically, you educate the hands, that you want them to be technically endowed and be able to run, to contribute to the economy in different ways, not only relying on employment. So the journey of CBC has largely been towards that. How do we get every child to discover themselves and to nurture their own individual potential and eventually be productive in the economy they are living in? So it was a positive step. However, there has been several setbacks, and these setbacks are when we look at maybe the time we allowed ourselves, maybe there was an opportunity to be a little bit more gradual, allow more time, but also forward planning. So that we are not waking up 2 weeks into junior secondary reporting and that we are saying we will be in primary schools, right. As opposed to a decision that was communicated earlier. So it's a good shift. It's a desirable shift. But then there's a lot of work and thinking that needs to go around adequate planning, adequate stakeholder engagement. We've seen a lot of tensions also, like Jane Ross is pointing out, that some stakeholders don't feel already convinced that they should be shifting towards this system. And we consider, for instance, the teachers. These are people who are central to facilitating these aspirations. But then all the time, there will be these challenges around. We've not been adequately trained, we are not aware, we don't know how to implement the assessments. And we know right now, these assessments will determine where a child goes. So this teacher needs to be at the forefront in saying, I know and I understand, and I can do it by myself. Rather than saying, oh, I don't think I'm adequately prepared to do it. So I think it's looking at how some of these critical players could go through a mindset shift. And largely, maybe you don't blame them, because when we shifted from the 7 subjects to the 5 subjects, and we dropped the home sciences and the arts and the music, these subjects are back. And the teachers who went through 5 subjects are now on the ground. And I never went through home science, but I'm expected to teach home science. So there's a process of first educating myself before I educate this child. And that could explain potentially why, in my own thinking, some of these projects are done by parents, because those parents went through that system that taught them how to knit, how to do all this woodwork stuff. But this teacher who did 5 subjects has been, disenfranchised from that, opportunity. So how do we get them to feel that they're comfortable and confident in handling the content first and foremost, so that we try to strike a balance between what they are saying and where the gap is, and address the gap.
All right. I think you've raised a fantastic point there when you're talking about the issue of the competency of the teachers that we have, especially now. Some have said that the JSS is the most critical part of all the levels of education. But there's an issue you mentioned, some of the disparities. Let's begin with the issue of infrastructure. It's been a conversation we've had in the country for quite a long time, and the disparities that we have and the inequalities. Some schools, we have learners who study under the shade of a tree, and then you have schools that have good infrastructure, laboratories and all these things. So what does that mean for us as a country and for learners to be able to create that equality when it comes to the quality of education that every learner deserves to get?
There's definitely such a huge disparity. I was talking to Dr. Jane Ross, and we were remembering a forward that was going round and round last year of a swimming project that was on the ground. I don't know if you saw it. Yeah, so children were swimming in dust.
Wow.
There was also another forward, which also upset me, that there was the idea was to teach children to be entrepreneurs, but in a particular school they were all selling bananas, and they were just shouting "Nunua, nunua, nunua, nunua." Okay, so what were we trying to get there? Okay, so the curriculum wants children to learn how to swim. Where are the pools? Okay. And if you don't have a pool, what is the solution? Where can your children go and at least have that experience of getting into water? I mean, there's a common saying that Africans fear water. So I think it's a positive move, but then now the infrastructure issue comes in. And it is the majority of the children that part of the curriculum is not meeting the need. Let me go back to the entrepreneurship example, where the idea is we are supposed to learn what goods to sell. Look at the market. If everyone is selling banana, is Jane selling banana, Regina also banana, why should I also sell banana? What can I do? That is now how I think different, to stand out and to put myself out there at the front. And then what about what do I cost that item? How am I going to get profit? That was what CBC wanted us to learn, the curriculum wanted us to learn. But you see, because of the limitations of maybe the implementer, the teacher, the school staff, the leadership, we just copy something that we are seeing that is happening maybe downtown or in our markets like that. So infrastructure-wise, I think, I don't know what I can say. The most recent one is the building of the school labs. Okay, where in just last year. If you didn't have a lab and if you didn't have that, the children were going to have to transition in a school that has a lab. So you find that the schools that could afford that went ahead and built the lab and expected an avalanche of children to come in, which would not have worked, because really who would have accommodated all these children from the public schools and all that. So there's a huge burden on the government, the shoulders of the government, to give us the infrastructure so that every child, remember what Virginia has said, this is a CBC was to bring every child to be whole, okay, to meet the needs of every learner. But when you come down to it, there are things that government needs to do to make sure that they boost the infrastructure of the whole country, all the schools. Let them have a basic level of infrastructure. May I add, for us who went to public schools in the 80s, almost all public schools had the same thing. It didn't matter where you were going. I remember public schools had the pool, had similar number of classes, had similar number of resources. The field was the same. It didn't matter where you were. There was a standard structure to that.
All right.
Yeah.
Dr. Jane Rose, I mean, when we're looking at where we are and of course the needs that the learners will, you know, what we need at the end of it all for the learners to be able to get quality education, the disparities are there. How do we begin to bridge that gap?
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. I'll begin by mentioning that we are all actually aware of the SDGs and the SDG 4 advocates for quality education for children, learners, you know, irrespective of their socioeconomic standing, irrespective of their gender, that all learners, all children actually, should have access to quality education. And when we look at the current implementation of the 844, the disparities are so huge. Many schools, especially the public schools, have no facilities. We are talking about the laboratories, even classrooms. We've seen children learning under trees. Teachers are not adequate at all. We have very few teachers. The student-teacher ratio is so high. So that one now impends. You know, it actually impacts negatively towards the implementation of the CBC curriculum. Therefore, as a government, the government needs to take, you know, measures to ensuring that there is equality across the board. It doesn't matter whether this child is in which part of the country. We know very well currently the schools in the urban areas are very well equipped compared to the schools in the rural areas, where some of them have never seen most of these things that you're talking about. They're just learning. And again, the implementation also is a challenge according to where the child and the learner is, and the teacher also. For example, a child in Nairobi will be told, go, you know, let them, as part of their homework, let them make a bed, take a photo, and send to us. What about that child who is actually in Marsabit? Does the mother or the you know, the caregiver have a phone that can take a photo and send to the teacher? Are those facilities there? One thing I would say is that we need to ensure that there's equality.
Well, we've been told that, you know, for every new thing, we will suddenly endure and go through these teething problems. We've been told many times that these are just teething issues. But deep down that, you know, we still need to fix some of these things, to create some level of balance. How do we begin addressing that?
Innovation. I'll say innovation has to be key. We're already in the deep of it. We can't go back. We've started implementing the curriculum. So you're not saying now that we are not having the facilities. You're not. We'll call upon the teachers to be innovative. For example, if you are required to actually take the children for swimming, don't tell them to swim on the floor, for example. Become creative. There couldn't be a school in your neighborhood that has a swimming pool, you know. you do not have to tell the parents to go and buy expensive, you know, materials for the implementation. You do not have to tell them to print, because how many parents can afford to print? How many parents have printers in their homes? So let them be innovative, let them be creative. Use the locally available materials. That is what innovation is.
Right.
And that is actually also cause for a total mind shift on the part of the teachers. Daktari has mentioned that, you know, the same teachers who are there are still there, those who are teaching 5 subjects. But they're now expected to teach 12 subjects. At the junior secondary, we need a mind shift. All of us to embrace the system and to see how best it works. Implementation, innovation will be key for us to succeed in this.
Right.
Yes, because we cannot only count on the government to provide for us. What are we doing on our part? Yes, the government has done its part, but on the part of the teachers, what are we doing? Those teachers who have gone through the training, the government may not be able to train all the teachers. Can they become peer trainers for their colleagues in schools? Can the principals of these schools create an environment whereby the teachers will be peer trainers for their colleagues? What they were trained on, they train their colleagues. And that way, we move together as a nation.
All right. Virginia, because this whole thing is intertwined with the fact that also we have the first cohort of the JSS learners who began learning this week. Now, the JSS, we know that it has already been domiciled within the primary schools, which still takes us back to the issue of infrastructure, which I want to get an answer from you. Is, you know, even the most basic structures are missing, like what we talked about, learners, you know, learning under, you know, trees and all. How then, you know, do we move forward? Who are these people that we need to come together, sit on a table and figure out what needs to be done?
A good question, and I mean, it's the reality that we have. And the ideals, like I said, of this curriculum is that at least every child gets an opportunity to feel appreciated and to feel nurtured throughout the system. There are 2 things to it. One is currently we have 2 classes within primary. Right. You know, at least in majority of the institutions where these children would have gone to grade 7. So potentially the sitting classes are there. But what was interesting is that you still see photos doing rounds that children reported, but there were no desks. And some people are asking, where did the desks go to? Because otherwise these children would still have transitioned to grade 7 in the same school. And I think that the decision to domicile them there was partly to leverage the existing infrastructure, the classrooms at least, and the desks. But then the fact that there are some schools that will not have already, or that are not, there are schools that are not ready to domicile, or rather to accommodate junior secondary, they were not cleared, means there are schools that will receive excesses. We saw a case of Bungoma DB the other day on the news with very many children, and you know, wanting to come in and join them, and they had put a limit, I think, of 400 on that material day. So it's they are critical players to this space. First is the leadership of the school. And the leadership of the school, alongside the boards of management, they have a mandate of looking at the administratively how a school should run, but also mobilizing partners and actors on the ground to support in this process. So partnerships are really critical. And I think we are in a very, we're in a blessed situation because our country, people love giving. There's so much that people would contribute towards if we conveyed the message the right way. And I'm these days wondering, is it time to start amplifying that which is working, so that whoever has their resources and they feel they can invest would see it as a viable project to go and, you know, become a sponsor in a school, because those people are allowed within the primary institutions and secondary. I'm allowed to be a sponsor in my village school if I have the capacity to contribute. So there's that mandate of leadership. And our head teachers, I think this is the moment to prove themselves, because at least they're the people who are connecting, who are the interface between the child and all this that's going around on media and around the community with people who have so much discouragement around this whole system. So they'll have a lot of work to do in clearing that and giving an impression that it is possible to do it and to make it work. The second party to this is the parent. And, you know, education is, I think, when we are selling education policies, I think it's important to consider how we communicate them, so that we don't tell parents, we will give you capitation, and then the parents will figure out, oh, so I'll be leaving the house at 5 and coming back at 8, the government is taking care of my child. What is your role in parenting? Now, we know there are instances, or we have had incidences of indiscipline in these schools, but the parent now becomes a critical piece. And especially in the JSS, the rationale is that the parent, the teacher, and the child will work together, because this is where you're identifying the interests, the talents of this child. Because remember, after grade 8, when they go to grade 9, this child is faced with 3 choices, and they have to fit within the best choice, so that they don't transition to STEM, and they would rather have been in social sciences, or they would have been in sports and arts. So it's really a critical moment that our parents are also brought very close to these engagements and made to realize, but also in the leadership, the general leadership, the overall leadership, maybe from the ministry and Friends of Education like the universities and civil society, is to unpack what we're expecting from the parent. So we have a blanket way of saying we expect parents will work together with the teachers and the students to discover their talent. How does that happen in reality? Are we investing in demonstrating how it works? Do even our leadership, our teachers understand that for me to be able to uncover what Virginia's talent is, this is how I would go about it. These are some of the exposure, learning experiences I need to expose them. Are we offering that level of differentiation even during the day-to-day of the classroom? We saw the challenge of portfolios. I mean, Dr. Otheri here may be in a different space altogether, because I think over COVID she was thriving all through. But you know, we went to schools and the teachers would ask, how do I even prepare a portfolio? That was in the early years, the grades 1, 2, and 3. Now we're in junior secondary and we are saying the same system applies, that you need to have to cumulatively build an assessment portfolio for every child that will inform the decision as to where they transition to. So all these mechanics of making it work, you know, have to be figured out. And maybe one way is to start celebrating what's working and showcasing. If you have an innovation as a public school, as a private school, how do we bring it to the media? How do we start amplifying and celebrating it so that other people can learn from it? And then the issue around my teacher, the teacher of 21st century. We can talk about 21st century, but there has to be total transformation. CBC is talking about beautiful things, but are we seeing them being lived by our very own educators? One of them being learning to learn. Zainab, for how long shall we say that we have not been trained? What is your responsibility in educating yourself? Now, if I am to nurture a child who is capable of self-educating and learning and reading widely without depending solely on the teacher, what the teacher says, then I have to demonstrate that. We have an advantage in that there's a lot of technology today. There's a lot of resources available online for free, but how much of this self-educating are we pursuing as teachers to unpack and be able to uncover all these mysteries around CBC? So I think there's really a call, first of all, to individual responsibility. Wherever we are, as a teacher, as a parent, what's my contribution first? And how can I educate myself better so that I'm part of the solution? Because if we all lean towards the problem side, who will solve this for us?
Wow, and certainly very interesting remarks there. One of the key issues, Dr. Otheri, that I want to get you know, your thoughts on is the issue of the involvement of the parents or the guardians. It's a guiding principle within this curriculum to have parents and guardians of learners involved in the process. But, you know, some of the concerns that I've seen from different quarters is, what if the parent is not, you know, literate enough to help the students be able to perform some of these tasks that, you know, they're supposed to at home? Then what happens there?
I think even the problem is not that, what if the parent is not literate? What if the parent is not willing? Or is not available? Or is available, is present in person, but doesn't understand why they should be the ones teaching the child. There's such a shift. I've thought about this a lot, because there's a shift from the original 844, which I went through, where we did sewing, we were hemming, we made clay pots, we made baskets, you know. And I remember my mom, my dad, we did tie and dye. I think I even had, for a while, I had a shirt that I made. I wore it for a while, which I made myself. And I'd never once, or maybe I was a child, I didn't understand, I'd never once had discourse between my parents and the teachers, with parents saying or complaining about anything to do with education. They were so education-minded, that generation. But when it comes to my generation, people are now too busy.
Is it that the dynamics have changed because perhaps now that we have more parents working and saying, look, I'm too tired to sit down and come after, you know, from work and start helping my child to do this work, to create a car out of a box, perhaps?
I don't know, but there's definitely a shift in our values and our understanding of ourselves and our roles. There's just a shift. There could be that understanding that as a parent, these are my roles, and the teacher is the one in charge of education. It doesn't work like that.
So it's the mindset issue that Virginia was speaking about, and the fact that we must show at least how, or guide the parents on how these things can really work. Now then we can create some synergy between the stakeholders.
Can I even stop the conversation and just come down to the heart of it? Then I'll link it to your question on parents. The heart of the matter, as the way I see it, what's the problem, is the individual. Who are you? Do you know who you are? Okay? Why are we implementing a new curriculum, competency-based curriculum? Did you ever ask yourself why you are doing something different? Or it's just brought to you as a product and you're expected to just teach it? Do we go back and reflect that what am I doing on this earth? What is my purpose as a teacher? No, just it could be for anything, but let's now just narrow it down. As a teacher, as a human being, what is my role? Okay? And when I'm given something new to do, then how can I align it to myself? Okay? So how can you align a competency-based curriculum which is expecting you to, as Virginia said, learn or teach others how to learn, and you have no clue even what that means. But it has been given to you in form of a curriculum in a book, so you go and teach it like a robot who doesn't even understand what all this is about. Why are we doing competence now? We go a step back even to the policy makers and the people who made this come together and give it to us. Did they ask themselves, why did we need to now go to a competency-based curriculum? Of what use, of what need, of what value is it to the African, to this Kenyan? Why change things, okay? Once you have understood the why and who you are, why are we wanting to lift or change curriculum? Is it because we want this African child to be the best, to be able to compete with everyone all over, you know, global, or what is it? Then we can now start sitting easy, start breathing a bit, because you have understood the why. You have not understood the why. You are being brought a curriculum, here it is.
So all this time, do you feel like perhaps we've not been able to reach to that level of understanding?
Yes, because it's something that it needs you to be a philosopher. You need to think. We are not taught to be philosophers in this curriculum. But you are taught to think for yourself. Can you even self-reflect? When there's a problem, are you able to stop, think critically? Because critical thinking is, there's a problem, there's an issue, you identify it. Then to be able to create a solution, do you even have an imagination? Do you even know how to imagine a solution? Because imagining is something not tangible. You're used to being given something tangible to follow. Do you even have that in you? So if we can crack the whys, if we can crack how to help us think and create and innovate, then we will do CBC very well. Because CBC is all about creating. It's all about new things. And then to bring parents on board is not an issue. And I'm not showing off or being proud. I'm just using myself as an example of what can work. And I'm blessed that even other institutions, including Ministry of Education and KICD, they come to Freedom School to find out how are you doing it, because you're doing it well and you're doing it right. So you find that when you have the passion, you've understood creativity, you've understood that whatever is in the curriculum is just a guideline. Remember, it's about competence.
But implementation
competence is a spectrum. There's someone with maybe smaller competence, someone with a larger competence. Now, parents come on board. I'll give you a very example of a way parents came on board in our school. We just had an entrepreneurship week, which is very CBC. And we taught the children about entrepreneurship, that you need to come up with an idea, you need to package that idea, sell that product. And then the parents came on board to help. The child came up with the idea, we came up with the training, the parent now comes in to help the child bring the idea forward. And there was this boy called Kerama. That time he was 8 years old or 7. And he loved juices, because one of the things we were using in the curriculum was to show children what other children are doing outside there. And he was seeing these children chefs from abroad. A child is cooking, has a cooking program, is even being invited to talk shows like Ellen. So the child was like, I want to do this. I love making juice, but I want to sell it. The mother, the parents came on board and helped him put it together. And now it's a fully fledged business. Even the mom has quit her job. And this is because of CBC. Now what's happened to this parent is she's now even a CBC advocate. She's been invited by KICD to talk to other parents. Other schools call her. She's called Claire. Other schools call her to go and talk to them about how can a parent get involved.
All right.
So, yeah. Okay. Maybe I can go on and on.
Just hold on to that thought, unless I just give you 10 seconds, but we have to take a very quick break. You wanted to respond to something she said?
Just to highlight around parental engagement. And I think, Zainab, the parental engagement is not only pegged on literacy.
All right.
Because there are many other things that parents can do. And you see...
Just the support.
There is academic part, but then there is also the values and life skills part.
Right.
So at the home, the parent investing in nurturing all these values and creating an environment that supports this child, an ecosystem that's supportive and appreciative. And we were having this discussion yesterday, and the question came: what do even parents talk to about education with their children? Because sometimes children have these deep-seated worries and expectations they have had from their parents, which they don't really connect to. So there's more than just looking at the homework. And I think we need to demystify the role of the parent and see it as a broad-based function rather than just supporting with the homework, and we could look at that further.
All right, when we come back, Dr. Jane Rose will give us more on the same. All right, so time to just take a very quick breather here on MLive NTV. Thank you for staying with us. Talk to us. The hashtag we're using is MLive NTV at NTV Kenya, at Zainab Ismail. What do you think we need to do to make sure that the CBC that we're already in is going to work? All right, let's take a quick break. We'll be back.
Centum Real Estate brings to you 265 Elma 1 Apartments, the newest and most stylish development in Kasarani. Pay a deposit of 250,000 Kenya shillings and the balance in flexible installments or mortgage finance.
Pata taarifa teke na e-paper. Stay in the know on the go. Getting the full story Bilangori. To sign up, choose your preferred subscription. Use the promo code SUBZ22 to get 20% off and pay. Get your favorite newspaper and enjoy the truth anywhere, anytime. For inquiries, email epaper@ke.nationmedia.com or call 0790 111 111. Subscribe today and get your taarifa teke.
Hallelujah! The Lord is worthy of all praise.
God rewards faithfulness. And he's saying to Abraham, you have been faithful. You have walked the journey, you've stayed the course. And I will show myself faithful on your behalf. When we pray, we say, God, we are trusting you for breakthrough. We are waiting on you for breakthrough. But do you know what? Sometimes it is God who is waiting on you.
Time to black man unite.
Hey, welcome to Jam Down. Yeah, man, the baddest show all over East and Central Africa. The only show that makes sense on a Saturday, maze. Kila sato, kuanzia saa 4 mpaka saa 6. Na hii sato, maze, will be having the royal family of reggae music, Morgan Heritage na Peter Morgan, maze, wakilaunch goma yao noma sana. Brand new, inajiita Just a Number. Au sio? Kapienga.
Awo.
Yeah.
Manze jo mtaanzia pale hivyo kwenye radio, hiyo ni kuanzia 7 mpaka 10, sio? Yes, alafu tena tuingia pale hivyo kwenye screens tusababisha na miondoko nani. Hapa ndio tutakuwa tunamalizia mtu wangu. So make sure uko tuned in 10 PM mpaka 12 in the boom.
Hashtag the Jam Down KE. Kaboom.
Don't try to run, no back door. Don't try to blow me out. You're not gonna pretend.
Grow your biashara by accessing loans, investment options, convenient banking, network opportunities, and so much more. Njoo tukujenge. Visit any one of our 93 branches countrywide. Family Bank is regulated by the Central Bank of Kenya.
February is the month of love, and this February we've got an amazing activity for all the singles who are ready to mingle. It's going to be an afternoon full of good vibes and awesome activities from speed dating, sip and paint, charades, karaoke, and so much more. Get to enjoy live music from Hard the Band. Catch the Season 3 Episode 1 live recording of the Joyrides podcast. Mark your calendars for February 18th right here at Anzana Gardens from 1 p.m. to 10 p.m. Get your tickets on Kenya Buzz today. That's www.kenyabuzz.com. Tickets go for 2,000 bob for individual tickets. Lakini kama uko na ambogi of 5 people nashikana, and your only part is 7,500. XOXO, get ready to mingle.
She's my lover, she's my lover.
Claiming your assets is easy. Simply visit UFAA website www.ufaa.go.ke or dial *361# or visit Huduma Center near you.
All right, thank you for staying with us. You're watching M Live on NTV. Let's talk about something that was off air, and as I was listening, it was the issue of the recruitment of teachers. Now, for the junior secondary school, the Teacher Service Commission had mentioned about the issue of recruiting and deploying about 30,000 teachers across those different schools. But there are concerns as well from a section of education stakeholders who said out of these 30,000 teachers, 22,000 of them are intern teachers. And the question was, how would you entrust such a critical part of the education level to intern teachers? Was this the right move? Dr. Jane Rose, I want to get your thoughts on this issue of the teachers and the skills that the teachers have and their competency in handling this transition.
Thank you, Zainab. Actually, I'll begin by saying that, for teachers to be fully supportive of the program of implementation of the CBC curriculum, there need to be incentives. There need for them to feel that they are appreciated. When you, for example, employ teachers as intern teachers, really, I think it's not a move towards the right direction, because we have so many thousands of graduates who are qualified to be employed as teachers. Why not absorb them, employ them fully? So, because we are not implementing CBC just for a moment. It is here for us. It's here to stay. We need these teachers. Why don't you bring them on board? So that brings the issue of motivation, incentives. How motivated will they be as actually they implement this particular curriculum? So I think that was not there's need for all the teachers to be employed. Let them employ the 30,000 teachers. instead of having the 22,000 as interns, let them be fully employed. That would have been better. However, we will say as it may be, let them embrace it, let them ensure that they are well equipped for this particular program. Are they trained? That is another question. Are these teachers who are being recruited, employed, trained to implement the CBC curriculum? That is a question we need to ask us. Because most of the challenges that we've been facing in the implementation was lack of training of teachers. Very few teachers per school are trained. Are these teachers who are being hired, trained to implement the CBC? Well, they train them before they deploy them to teach. Otherwise, if we do not look at those gaps and bridge them, we will still be facing challenges. We will be facing resistance from the teachers as we implement. What is happening on the ground again is, even as we train the teachers, how they are. Because some of them felt they were not really motivated. They could go for trainings late. They attend those trainings late. So a training that is supposed to take 3 hours, 3 days, teachers go home with a quarter of the content of the training. So let us not go back there. Let us ensure that these teachers are well trained, whether they're intern teachers, whether they are fully employed, but they are permanent and pensionable. Let them be well trained to implement the curriculum. Let them be well motivated. And a motivated employee will always deliver. Yes, all right. That is very important. The needs of the teachers must be taken care of as we expect them to deliver, to take care of this key component of our education.
Right. Yes, Dr. There.
In addition to what Dr. Jane is saying, the training, and I've attended these CBC trainings together with my teachers just to know what's happening, lacks a very important aspect. Before you give me, here is the curriculum, this is what you're going to be doing, you must touch my emotion. There's a training that needs to help me feel that I am part and parcel of this, and help me to reflect on who am I and what is my role in delivering this, so that I own it. I'm not just doing it because I'm on a salary, or because my head teacher told me and the government said, Ministry of Education said, you must go for this training for 3 days. I'm actually now going, once I've been taken through a series of social, emotional kind of training, that inside, the intrinsic self, my intrinsic self, I don't have to be told again, you must go for this thing. In fact, I'm the one, as I'm being trained, I'm absorbing, I'm actually seeing myself as the giver of this curriculum to children, because now I've understood myself and I've understood why I'm doing it. There's an element that is missing, which is the emotional, the understanding of the human inside, not outside, that is so crucial. And if we get it, we'll be fine. And I think this is also an opportunity for me to talk about why Afrocentric, why Africa-centered learning is so important.
Just hold on to that point.
Okay, we're going to come back to that.
So that, when you say that, first of all, I think a lot of people don't understand what Afrocentric really means. Afrocentric approach to learning really means. So I'm going to come back to that in a moment. Virginia, let's still go back to the issue of the recruitment of teachers. Is it a bit concerning that even as we had the first cohort of these grade 7 learners begin their education this week, the issue of the recruitment began in November last year, but that's process is ongoing right now, where we're still yet to deploy the teachers. The recruitment is still ongoing. Is it that we were caught off guard? Is it that the government agencies were caught off guard? What do you think was amiss here?
Yeah, it's a concern when we see children in class and we are still discussing. Teachers have not reported yet, and it points to the challenges around, there's something I like referring to always, which I call it, forward thinking, even estimating or approximating how much time you need for what. And because you know the lineup of events, getting ready ahead of time. So I think that is one challenge that we are experiencing. It's a huge challenge that we acknowledge. We would have done better by anticipating all these planning and shortlisting and recruitment. Right now kids are in school. We know there's a training lined up, but it hasn't happened. So it may happen that after next week, when teachers, I don't know when they are going to be deployed, we will still need to take them outside class for them to be inducted and oriented. I think it just reminds us as a leadership in this country, in as far as matters education are concerned, that we need to be better planners and to always anticipate what is coming up. That was a planning issue. Yeah, it was a planning issue, which can be worked around. And it should be taken as a lesson, because even as we move to the issue you're talking about, 22,000 teachers who are on internship, and we know internship is for a year. Right. What happens after the 1 year? These people will just have acclimatized to the institution. Right. We are hoping that maybe they can get it extended to some for another period. But it's starting to think about the implications of whatever decision we take at this point. And even the level of support for these intern teachers. So if I'm coming fresh from graduate, I'm coming into a new level of education, what support mechanisms are there? And hopefully that this whole idea of there will be teachers who are being promoted from the primary section, maybe looking at how a kind of mentorship program, coaching program could be instituted within the institute, could be embedded within the institution, so that this intern teacher isn't struggling alone. Because if we refer them to the quality assurance, we know those people are quite distant. They represent an authority. You're not sure how easy it will be for them. So it's a planning issue that one could really, we need to seriously consider and get ready for it.
All right.
Yeah.
Before I continue, just as we still speak on that, there was this story on the Daily Nation. Of course, it's something that has created quite a controversy. It's on the school hours, where the cabinet secretary, of course, gave guidelines on when we begin classes and when we end classes. And what was it? I believe the classes were supposed to begin at 8 a.m. and end by 3:45 p.m. And says, we should not be overburdening our students with a lot of work and be able to give them time. But why is it that this is creating a problem? I thought this was a good thing.
Mixed feelings. Schools, right? The way they are taken in our society, they are more than just schools. Sometimes schools are considered spaces that support with the, holding the child as the parent runs the errand. So I think first is the scare. If these children are expected to leave the house at 7:30 and expected to leave at 5, what happens? So if they are coming in early and I don't have a house help, what happens? So schools are just bigger institutions, larger institutions than just the educating piece. They also play a caregiving a role. Now the issue of 8 to 5, and you appreciate where our CS is coming from, that there's some bit of mental health that we are concerned about. These children who, we saw the outcry last year when we had 4 semesters, 4 school terms, very short, and the learning was from 6 a.m. till whatever, late evenings. And all this, it's contributing to all the anxiety and the challenges we're experiencing in terms of discipline. And I think it's, from a mental perspective, it makes a lot of sense. How can we control what our children are exposed to and give them an opportunity to be children? All right. On the flip side, are we creating a scenario that will require us to come back and say, oh, we made a mistake, we should have thought better? I think there needs to be a caveat, because these 8 to 5 are hours when the teacher is present. Now, we're talking about learning to learn, collaboration, and all these other peer learning opportunities. What other time? And maybe these early morning sessions, 7 to 8, or 3:45 to maybe 4:30, when most schools, those could be the opportunities where these children are free now to engage as peers and learn with each other or from each other, support each other in whatever they're doing. All right. So for the day school, it may work. For the boarding school, what does that directive mean? Right. These are people who are in that institution for 24 hours. Yeah. What happens? What do they do with all this free time? Because
those are many hours.
Yeah, those are many hours. You can imagine from 8 to 3:45, and then after that, they are all let free. Right. So I think it's looking at how do we strike a balance in terms of, yes, the core teaching time, and these remedial sessions are still important because many children need to be supported to catch up. We don't all learn at the same pace. So if I needed extra support for certain children, we need to create that opportunity. So maybe these are just ongoing conversations, and we look forward to what further directives will be given to help us maybe see the broader view of such a directive.
All right. Yeah. Dr. Oseru, let me get to now the issue of, the curriculum that is within your school, which is influenced by Afrocentrism. Just give us an idea of what Afrocentrism really is, and what is it different from the CBC?
Absolutely not. The CBC curriculum actually embraces Afrocentrism very well. So Afrocentrism, or that mouthy word, just means Africa-centered. And some people are doing it without calling it Afrocentrism, which is fine. I think many people in their everyday life are Africa-centered. But for a school and a curriculum to consciously introduce practices, activites, values, and mindsets that make you Africa-centered is just some additional drive or passion that you add on to the curriculum. Okay, so let me give you an example of Afrocentrism, and I've been touching on it as I speak because it's really who I am now. There is no way that Africa can rise, or Africans can rise from where we are right now without being conscious of your African identity and your African self. There is no way. We are living in a very liquid, very gray area where we are one leg African, another leg very Eurocentric, okay? Based on the colonial impact that is still there. There's a lot of post-colonial influence that is going on at the moment. And Africans are taught so many great things: economics, entrepreneurship, technology, yeah? But you are not taught about your African identity and owning it, being so proud of who you are. And Afrocentrism helps you to dig deeper into what is this African person? What is this African greatness? What does it mean to have the African culture in a positive way, not in the negative narrative that is maybe the blanket of the world today, that the African narrative is not one of greatness and one of being the first. So
it's an idea. I've seen that. I've noticed that even you do not have conventional uniforms, that your learners wear African attire.
Yes, but African attire will not make you Afrocentric.
Right.
You can wear an African
it's just an identity.
Print. You can wear an African print but be the least Afrocentric person.
Right.
Afrocentrism must be your mind and your identity, that you're putting Africa first and you're understanding the position of the African.
Okay.
If I am committed to lifting Africa, it starts with me being proud of myself. And I don't know why it's so weird for us, and I think it's because we are not taught it, but other cultures, other great world economies, they are very proud of their culture, of who they are, of their language. Even this language that you're speaking, English, they speak it as a second language, yeah? Like later on in life, but as we are taught as a functioning language from when we are small. So Afrocentrism also critiques language and gives our own language, our own mother tongue's power. Like, I'll give an example of people in the rural areas speak their mother tongue very well, but they don't see it as a language of power. Actually, if you go to the rural areas and speak English or German or some European language, they think that you're more educated and you're more developed. So you're not speaking your mother tongue with the idea of, oh, this is an African language, that it's powerful. So Afrocentrism just helps you know that I'm an African, I'm great, and it all starts with me. I'm the solution.
Okay.
If these teachers that were training for CBC really understood their African self and their role in lifting Africa, a positive narrative that you're great, that everything you see in this world started with Africans. Some of the oldest, not even some, all, majority of the oldest fossils prove that life started here, that there were Africans living here. When you see that the first universities were developed by Africans, we wrote manuscripts, they're still there. When you go to Timbuktu, you know, you go to Mali, they're still there. You realize that the African is just a great human being, and we're not being taught those narratives. And I and our school, the Freedom Schools, our school is a living example of the power of understanding how great Africans are. When you understand how great Africans are, even the teachers are self-motivated, because you're no longer just seeing the curriculum or CBC as something in text. You're seeing yourself as a bridge, you know, to teaching great African minds who in turn will go and change the world.
All right.
Yeah.
And I think that's a fantastic idea. At least now we get to have an idea. So it's basically a CBC structure, but influenced with the idea of Afrocentrism.
Yeah,
right.
And I could say it's more than CBC, because it's one of the pillars of the education. There are pillars of education in the country, and one of them is to embrace your African heritage. So within that,
your citizenship and
yes,
heritage.
exactly. Can I quickly add that to prove just that Afrocentrism is not embraced? There's in CBC there's the opportunity to teach mother tongue, you know, and give it the level that it needs, you know. As you're teaching English, you're teaching mother tongue, they're equal. They're just languages, you know. Or even your language should come first. Actually, Ngugi wa Thiong'o says, if you learn someone else's culture and then and put it above your own, you're a slave. And why are you not a slave? You know, you're a slave because you're following somebody else's way.
All right.
But if you learn your own language, your own culture first, embrace it, then add others, you're now empowered, you're global. So CBC has reviewed, even recently, the mother tongue or indigenous
part
language.
Of the curriculum
yes,
now.
the indigenous language
So that's
curriculum.
interesting, right?
Yeah.
Because we're almost running out of time, but there's an issue I'd like us to touch on very quickly before we almost wind up. It's on this issue of a school, a primary school, DOK primary school, that's in Kisii. Now 6 teachers have actually been arrested. They have been taken into police custody because of a video that emerged online depicting minors engaging in indecent behavior, and you have someone filming this. So this is quite unfortunate. We cannot even play it on TV right now. But Dr. Jane Rose, when you're looking at this, and I think a lot of questions came from parents who say, look, we're giving you the responsibility of taking care of our children while they're in school. But this is what we're seeing, and this is unfortunate because this is just one incident that leaked on social media. What is happening on the background? As we move forward, as we're looking at the issue of the education sector in general, as we try and look at the implementation of the CBC, what are some of the things you hope we can fix, and what do you make of this particular issue?
Thank you, and I was mentioned that this is quite unfortunate, it's quite sad and unimaginable for a teacher to be engaged in such an act. Teachers are supposed to be role models. Teachers are meant to be mentors. Teachers are actually supposed to rise above everyone else.
Do you think this is going to erode the trust in the CBC? Because I think one of the messages that were posted by, I think some of the parents were saying, wait, is this what is in the CBC? And it's scary. Which of course is not, but you know, we're entrusting you to teach our children these things, these new skills and all, but we're seeing this is happening.
Unfortunately, some people might associate that with the CBC, which is not the case. Actually, I will say that these are well-worn teachers who are actually supposed to be punished for that act. That was, it's unimaginable, it's unfair, and it's unfortunate. So what I'll say is that there was lack of values. We need to, our value system,
we need to look into that.
We need to look into our value system as a country, and more so as educators. Teachers are actually looked at as very important people in the society. They're supposed to be people to be emulated. When parents entrust their children to the teachers, they expect them to be nurtured, to be taken care of, but they do not expect them to be misled. Because I'll say that was misleading, just to say the least. Therefore, moving forward, people need to embrace values. People need to look at education as a place where young people will be nurtured, not a place where young people will be misled, where young people will be better, be trained, to be taught to be better members of the society, not to get traumatized. Because I'm imagining, you know, how these children were traumatized. What about their colleagues, their peers? Some of them may not even go back to our school. I'm seeing a situation whereby even parents will withdraw their children from that school. So it's very important for us as a society, and more so as teachers, to ensure that we are actually modeling the best practice. You are becoming good examples, good role models, and that's a calling for every teacher.
Let me ask you this, because for me it was quite concerning to see, and because usually a day like this, Thursday, is a day that we reserve, you know, the voices of women, you know, to be heard on the different sectors. It was concerning for me that out of the 6 that were arrested, the teachers, 5 were actually female teachers that were propagating this behavior. Is that concerning for you?
That really concerns me. It's a matter of grave concern. Teachers, you know, especially women, I'll say women are supposed to be mentors. Women are supposed to be mothers wherever you are. They should have been the first people to say no to this act. It's quite unfortunate that they are the same people who are propagating.
Right.
But I'll say that should not, they're not representative of women.
Of women, right.
They are not. These are wayward characters. We should actually be
speaks of the
treated.
values that
Yes.
these people hold on an individual level.
At a personal level. And that's why they should be held personally accountable. Because I've seen in many places, even in a marketplace, when you see a madman undressed, and who comes forward to undress them? Women. I'll get my lasso from my bag, another one will get a scarf and try to cover this person.
So
Mother,
that
you know,
different.
women are actually supposed to mold. They're supposed to ensure that there's unity, there is peace.
Okay.
And the values are actually propagated. And moving forward, our education system should not actually only focus on the academics alone. Because most of the challenges we are facing as a nation, it's not because we are not educated.
All right.
I think Kenya, we are one of the most educated. You know, we have the highest educated population in the east and central of Africa. But we have a challenge with values. That is why we have very high levels of corruption. And not that those people are corrupt or people have not been to school.
All right.
They are people highly educated. That tells us our values are wanting, and really we need to do that. And more so, we need to actually emphasize on that, even in our school system.
All right.
Yes, at personal level, as a community, and even as a larger society, even as a nation.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. And, you know, we're almost winding up, but I also like to just get very quickly, Virginia, your comments on this particular issue, and moving forward, key highlights for you on what we need to do to ensure that we're able to work around the CBC and ensure success in its implementation.
Okay. Yeah, so I agree, this should not have happened. We don't want traumatized children in class.
Right.
Schools should be spaces of safety. And we have seen such campaigns of even saying where countries with war, schools labeled as safe zones, so that these children continue to receive their protection. So it's unbelievable that we could have individuals, grown-ups, parents involved in such. Of course, and we hope that these children will find justice, and I'm sure the employer must be doing something. But for those children and their parents, it's just to get a support system, you know, to deal with whatever may have these children may have gone through. So the other, my key highlights in as far as CBC is concerned, one is the appeal first to invest. And in investing, we will not say government alone.
Okay.
But we need to mobilize resources from all quarters, well-wishers, CSRs, you know, those companies and banks and, you know, all those friends of education.
All right.
This is their time to mobilize for their investments. And two is to realize how critical this moment is, because you're talking about the future of a generation. So there is need really for our parents, our teachers, our leaders to work as one, communicate when we can. Somebody said it's always good to listen to the dissenting voice.
All right.
So where those voices are emerging from, let's be keen to listen and get to action, because I am sure and I believe there are many actions that can be taken for any challenge that they experience. And the third one is you know, amplifying the role of the teacher. I love celebrating teacher. I am a teacher myself, and I wish and I pray that we would first realize how powerful we are, because if you educate 40 children per year, by the time you're retiring, you can imagine how much of an influence you're leaving behind.
Right.
It's a huge
impact.
So starting to celebrate the teachers, starting to celebrate their position in society, and just urging them to live that which they want their children to become.
All right.
Yes.
And I think we've completely run out of time, Dr. Otheri. I don't know if I can give you 10 seconds.
I have 10 seconds of a parting shot. Just listening to us.
Yeah.
I think CBC is a really beautiful curriculum. There's something good going on there, but we must choose our school leadership. You know, we keep talking about the teachers themselves, but the school leadership we must choose well and train them in social, emotional learning so that they are able to drive the impact for their own teachers. And then we must also embrace that we are the change we want to see. We keep banging negatively on CBC without now bringing out the solutions. We are not helping ourselves. And then the government, KICD, other educational bodies and partners should look at those who are succeeding in CBC and bring them on board to consult them on what is working on what. Somebody like myself, I should be used for this country. And I'm not a politician. I'm just saying it because the things that we're doing in our school could be happening in any other school. So 10 seconds for Dr. Jenia.
We are completely, Dr. Generals, have completely ran out of time. But I will certainly have to continue with this conversation soon and look at some of those other areas we've not been able to. But thank you so much, Dr. Otheri Kanayo, Principal Co-Founder, Children and Freedom Schools, Dr. Jane Rose Kibara, Educationist and Senior Lecturer and Researcher of Education Management and Policy at Kenyatta University, as well as Virginia Ndingiru, Director of Programs, Zizi Afrique Foundation. Thank you so much, ladies, for coming in this morning to have this conversation on the issue of education in our country, quite critical, and we certainly have a lot to still have a conversation on, so hopefully we'll be able to do that. Thank you for watching. My name is Zainab Ismail. Don't go away. Your world is coming up shortly with Winnie Lubembe. Have yourself a good morning and lovely day.